Species. Unite.
I know that one day for me in Antarctica, one morning for me in Antarctica is a dream for someone who will never get there because it's hard to get to. So I don't waste those opportunities. I don't sit there and go, I'm in Antarctica again. No, my brain will not go to that space because I know that people would kill. And I am the portal sometimes through which some people will experience different parts of the world.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Novogratz. This is Species Unite. We have a favor to ask. If you like today's episode and you have a spare minute, could you please rate and review Species Unite on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts? It really helps people to find the show. Hi, I'm Elizabeth Novogratz. This is Species Unite. This conversation is with Jason Edwards. Jason is an award-winning photographer, TV host, and conservationist. His image portfolio ranks among the largest of any photographer in the National Geographic Society's long history. And he has a new book out called From Icebergs to Iguanas. It's a large format series of books illustrating his National Geographic imagery. And it's a spectacular book, one that will make you proud to be a citizen of planet Earth. Just a warning, Jason is at home during this interview, and his dog is close by. She just had 10 puppies, and they make some noise. Hi, Jason. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Thanks for having me.
We're going to talk about your book, From Icebergs to Iguanas, which is absolutely stunning. It really makes you realize just how lucky we are to live on this planet, every page. But it's also a lifetime, a huge career of yours represented throughout the book. 30 years of traveling the world and shooting some of the most incredible places and beings and everything else that we have here. Before you were a photographer, you were a zookeeper. So will you talk about that a little bit?
I actually started shooting when I was 8. So my mum had one of those little Kodak cameras that had the canister, it was a little plastic canister with the film went in from one spool to the other. And it's hard to describe, but some people might know the old Kodak canister cameras and all of that stuff's coming back now. And so I took my first pictures on a school excursion when I was 8 to the airport, the international airport here in Melbourne. And those pictures I've taken them from the tarmac. So they let us on the tarmac. And of all planes, it's a Pan Am. It's an American Pan American jet, 747. So my first frames were looking up at the jet, then they let us on. And I still have all these photos. And so I took this picture looking out over the wing. And I never thought, of course, that as an 8-year-old, what are you even thinking anyway? But I never thought that I'd spend thousands and thousands or tens of thousands, whatever, of hours looking over a wing from a long-haul jet. But ironically, my first month of secondary school, I actually went on a school excursion to the zoo. And after we did the classes, we played hide and seek. I hid too well, and my school left me behind. And I was left behind at the zoo at 12. So I sort of started photographing at 8, was left behind at the zoo at 12. And then, you sit there going, you couldn't script that. I finished high school and I wrote a letter to the zoo and just said, look, is there any positions available? And they said, can you come for an interview? And that was on the Tuesday. And I started as a zookeeper at 18 on the Thursday. Suddenly I'm surrounded by wildlife all day, every day. And so zookeeping's quite an unusual career because you spend more time with non-human species than you do with humans. And so very quickly you become engulfed in this world of smells and feces and diseases and all of these sorts of things. Melbourne Zoo's the second oldest zoo in the world to London. And so your days are spent, it's a lot of manual labour, but it's fascinating because you're working with endangered species, things like that. But it's also quite intensive. And there's a lot of politics in zoos. There's lots of politics with conservation and management and ego and all of those sorts of things. But I just started shooting, trial and error. I'd had this epiphany at 14 or 15. I wanted to make images for a living. And as I'm doing my studies were all in the animal sciences. So I did 3 degrees in the animal sciences and surrounded by animals, shooting. And the zoo would get requests for imagery. So someone, you would call up as a publisher and say, do you have a picture of a wolf or a gorilla or whatever? And reception would always just say, look, there's this young guy here. He's always got his camera. Here's his phone number. And they would leave a message on my answering machine at home. I'd call them back. And I started getting pictures published, because book publishers, children's publishers, things like that were always calling the zoo. And so one year, I think I might have been about 20 or something, maybe even 19, but I mean 2021 or something. I spent 6 months of my salary on a copyright lawyer and had him design me a contract for representing my work, because I thought to myself, I need a platform by which people to understand who I am. So I registered a business, a stock agency called Bioimages. Everything I shot went into Bioimages, and then people could access that.
You were really smart.
Yeah.
And you're like 19 and you're already knowing all this. And also, you really had a lot of faith in your work.
Yeah.
Right? Like you knew.
I think so.
Yeah.
I think, and I've always been racked partly due to my upbringing because, in our house or in Australia, if you step up, there'll always be someone to cut you down. So it was a pretty brutal sort of, if you achieve something, someone was there to nail you, so I think it was me trying to, not say, hey, I'm really good at this, but just to actually say, if someone thinks I'm good enough for them to make money out of my product, then I should also make some money if possible. So Jason Edwards and Bioimages started getting published everywhere. So the business took off. And if people want to know, how you get a business running, this is basically the math. So for 10 years, I was a zookeeper for 12 and a half years. For at least 10 of those years, I didn't take a day off. And I don't say that lightly. I mean, I did not take a day off. And so I'd get to the zoo at 8 o'clock. When we broke for morning tea at 10, I'd check voice messages. I'd make calls from the office. At lunchtime, I'd go home for lunch. I lived across the park from the zoo. I'd work on the business. Afternoon break, I'd work on the business. I'd come home from the business. I'd work for 2 hours on the business. Then I'd have dinner and watch the X-Files with my partner. They'd go to bed. I'd work until 3 o'clock in the morning. Then I'd get 2 or 3 hours sleep. I'd get up at 6, and then I'd do 2 hours before I started the zoo at 8. And I would do that on weekends. I would do it weekdays. And I had a lot of energy. But that's what it took to get Bioimages up and running, because no one had done this before. And I would just book a ticket and I'd go to Chile, or I'd book a ticket and I'd go to Tanzania or whatever. I'd get off the plane with no plans and barely any money in my pocket. And I'd be gone for however long the shoot would last, for sometimes months. And I'd bounce through countries and, get shot at and all of these sorts of things. So I'm just shooting with a bag full of film, and then I'd come home and see what I got. Everyone has these multiple careers in life. And then you think, okay, I'm going to go off and do this, and then I'll have more time to do X, Y, and Z. But that's very rarely what happens. Very, very, very rarely. You fill that with other tasks on the business or your passion, whatever it is, and then life just creeps in again. So basically, when those relationships that I had through the zoo folded, I just went, enough's enough. I need to take that separation. I'd graduated from all of my degrees. I'm going to walk out of the zoo after that length of time and just see where the road takes me. And by that point, Jason Edwards and Bioimages had a substantial presence in the stock market here in Australasia. And so people would call up, I'd sell them the pictures. If I didn't have it, I'd go and shoot it. I was pretty determined, Elizabeth. I think I loved the road, And so I had no income at that point. So where it had been subsidized for 12 years, or the better part of 12 years, I was suddenly in a situation, and people say, how is that even possible? Well, you have to be one eye, just one eye looking forward and saying, well, I love this, I want it. I have to sacrifice everything. I'm not going on holidays with my partner to have a holiday. Even if I'm telling them that, I'm actually going there to create content for my photography archive. I've made all the mistakes. I could write a book just on the mistakes I've made. But, it was one of those scenarios where magazines had then started calling me and saying, can you do a shoot for us? My first shoot for Australian Geographic was they had a sea snake that had come into the aquarium in Melbourne. It was a new species to science. It was dying, not because it was in the aquarium, it had been caught in a fishing net. So I raced down, the aquarium told me to park my four-wheel drive in spot X, which I did. I raced in, I photographed the sea snake, come back out, my four-wheel drive's gone, because where they told me to park was a tow-away zone. So by the time I got the four-wheel drive back, and I think the assignment fee was like $250 or something. The fine on the car and the towing was like $750. So I made a loss of $500. But, then the next job I got was half a day with that Geographic. And then eventually I got a day-long job, and then I got a 2-day job, and then so on and so forth. So that's how it works in publishing, or how it works in any creative endeavor. You start doing that little hop further up the tree. And if you perform and you deliver, then they will be in a situation where they'll want to hire you again. And that was where my career progressed then. And, then it was me that called Geographic. I waited. People think they're ready straight off the bat now, and that's just, I don't know, ego or ignorance or whatever. That's fine. People can think what they want to think. Probably, yeah. But for me, I'd been working for many, many publishers by that point, by the time I called Washington, D.C., which is where Nat Geo's based. And I rang reception, and I just rang up. And I just sort of said, can I speak to someone at the magazine who works, because I only did wildlife back then. My career's more diverse now, but back then it was only wildlife. And then the lady at reception said, can you hold? Then she came back a few minutes later and she said, can I have your name, sir? And I gave her my name. And then she put me through, and the lady that answered the phone was the director of wildlife photography for National Geographic Magazine, and her opening line was, we've been waiting for you to call. Literally, that was her opening line. And I just went, wow. And so they'd been watching what I'd been doing. They'd been vetting me from afar. Now, maybe they would have called, but they're busy people or whatever. But the timing, the universe connected us at that time. And she said, what's your story idea? So I pitched her an idea, and I sent some transparencies, color slides across. She said, go and shoot some more stuff. So I did another 4 shoots on that story, which I funded again. Everyone expects to be paid. Forget being paid. You fund it all yourself. They're your personal projects that you're trying to get someone to pick up. You just work. Put all your own money into it. There's no other way about it. And then they turned around and looked at it and said, look, they schedule 18 months in advance, 2 years in advance. And they said, it doesn't fit the schedule, but we'd like to break it up and put some in the magazine. And is that okay? And we'll pay you. And I said, oh my God, yeah. So that edition of the mag came out on the same weekend that I got married to my wife, my current wife, which I'm still married to. So then they said, come to Washington. We think you should come to Washington. Bring 150 frames that you think tell your career so far. Like, I'm young, I'm a baby. So I had to pick 150 frames for this once in a lifetime, potentially, opportunity. And again, I bought myself an air ticket. I found some money. I borrowed some money from friends to get accommodation in the US and things like that. I jumped on a plane and I went to Washington, D.C. And I had I presented that work 44 times, I think, in 10 days to different editors and directors. And eventually worked my way up the hierarchy till I was sitting in God's office. Now, God's office for a photographer on Earth is the director of photography at National Geographic. And I wound up with the then director and the assistant director agreed to meet me because everyone else, 43 other meetings had gone well. And before I left Washington, I was offered a contract, and that was 24 years ago.
In all the decades that you have been shooting all over the world, over 70 countries, and you've kind of seen everything, right? But since you started 30 years ago or longer.
Longer, yeah.
Longer.
Yeah.
And when you go back to some of these same places now, are you seeing, like, is it devastating?
Yeah.
Because the last 30 years has been such a massive
It's been there's
show on earth.
there's a lot
right?
going on, yeah. And
Yeah.
I mean, look, it would be fair to say that I have drunk a lot of alcohol and cried many, many, many times in some of the environments that I work in. And that is because some of it is just a horror story. It is just a horror story. And then other areas I've seen come back and they're better than they were. So I'll give you an example. So Ngorongoro Crater, which is in Tanzania, is the world's largest intact terrestrial volcano caldera. When you stand on the rim of it, you can't believe how big this is, but you can see it's a caldera, it's a volcano. And when you stand there, you can't believe that humanity has managed to protect this area because all the wildlife lives in there. They're on the crater floor and lions are hunting wildebeest and buffalo and all of these kinds of things. And there's serval and crown cranes and everything. And it is literally a UNESCO World Heritage Site. But also simultaneously, we could have gone in there and killed everything. But when I started working there as a teenager, like at 19 or something, there were vehicle tracks everywhere, because there was no laws. You could drive right up to a line, you could do whatever. And it was a basket case. So over those decades, the restrictions have become so much more stronger. We're more aware now. So you can still drive all over the crater, but only on the tracks that they maintain, the national parks maintain. So now it's beautiful and it's lush and it's green and it's all of these things that you want it to be. Whereas before it was a dust bowl with vehicle tracks everywhere. So that juxtaposition of me having seen something come back and areas be protected really conflicts with changes I've seen in the landscape, in Greenland, for example, with climate change, and in Antarctica and reefs becoming coral bleached and things like that, and then other areas coming back. So sometimes they've been devastated a long time ago and I've seen them come back because nature will come back if you give it a chance. So for me, that ability to have both the positive and the negative, I think, is the key to success for staying on the road. I try and find everything interesting, but there are moments where, I'm a glasses 3/4 full kind of guy, but, I have to tell myself sometimes when I'm seeing terrible things, that this is not the sum of what is going on, because otherwise, you wouldn't get out of bed in the morning. And that's what I struggle with the media and everything now is that, there is so much negativity, which I get. But simultaneously, the world's an incredible place. It's staggering. The world, and I know people might listen to that and go, well, that's okay for Jace because he spends his life in 20 countries a year, flying around looking at beautiful things. It's not all beautiful that I see, of course, but a lot of it is. And that would be a fair assertion. But the thing is that taking that out of the equation, if I can, is that I think the world's amazing. Humanity's not, there are idiots out there who don't believe in climate change. And, for anyone who's wondering, is it true? Yeah, it's true. Okay, it's true.
How many more examples do people need?
For anyone who may be sitting on the fence, let me, I always like to help people see things differently. So I have a little bit of a theory on this that often helps people get over the hump. If you're wondering, have we seen sea level rise, sea level falls, glaciation, forest drying out and becoming extinct, and desertification, where deserts have come back and everything like that, all of these things that we are experiencing, oceans boiling, all of that kind of stuff, has it happened before? Yes. Nothing we are seeing now has not happened before. Okay? It's happened before because the planet is 4.5 to 5 billion years old. Billion years old. This is where I think all the environmental organisations and the people with other agendas, they all had agendas, got it wrong back in the 80s. The only thing we should be discussing is velocity. So velocity of change. So then the question just becomes, okay, what we've seen in the last 200 years since the Industrial Revolution and the second half of the 20th century through to now, what is that change? Why is the velocity changed in the changes? Obviously, people are having an impact. if you just look at the velocity, we come up in numbers, we change how we live our lives. There's a change in the atmosphere, there's a change in the oceans, all of those sorts of things. So everything else we agree on. So now it's just how fast is it happening? And so for me, having had decades on the road, I can see these changes and they're real. Now, does that mean Greenland won't freeze again at some point in the future? Potentially it will. But humans' ability to adapt and other species' abilities to adapt to change are not necessarily as fast as what we want them to be. Humans, yes, sometimes we can pull it off, but basically other species can't. And so therefore we need other species to survive. Can we stem the tide? I think we can. And science is amazing. But for me personally, people often wonder if I've seen it. And I have. But again, I'm only seeing my lifetime out of billions of years. So
Sure.
I'm always circumspect about it because someone could turn around and say, well, it could change after you leave. Yeah, of course. I'm not going to argue that.
Right.
Why would I argue that?
Right. Sure. Sure. Do you have a favorite place?
If I had a soul place, it probably is the Serengeti in Tanzania. So it's where the Great Migration is. Very Lion King-esque. Sounds like a bit of a cliche, especially with Mufasa being out at cinemas now. I started working there very young, and it was the place that I think changed who I was as a person, but also who I was as a photographer, because I basically was so in touch with these vast areas and the scent of rain on the earth and things like that was where I sort of went, wow, this is really what I want to be doing, and this is who I want to be as a person.
Next month, you're in Antarctica, and you've been to Antarctica quite a few times, right?
Yeah, numerous times.
How is this shoot different?
I have a long-term storytelling project that I'm working on there, as I do for the Serengeti and the Amazon. So some of the stories I do, I'll go back and I'll chip away at them if the opportunity provides. Maybe I don't get back for 5 years, and then I add a couple of frames to that story. So Antarctica is one of those subjects that's of fascination to me. And it's the way it's different is that it's so unpredictable down there. The weather is so unpredictable, and the ice is so unpredictable, and the wildlife is so unpredictable, because remember, it's like we go down for the Antarctic summer. Is it a shorter than short summer? Are the chicks going to be fledging? Are they already gone? Are there whales or no whales? Are the seals? You can go down there and see barely any mammals or barely any birds because they might have left depending on the time that you go down there. Or maybe there's a million birds there and you just don't even know where to point the camera. You can't do it justice. I'll go down there and maybe every day is a blizzard for 3 weeks. I still have to find something to shoot. Or maybe every day is Bluebird Day, when the sun's shining, the ice is amazing. Maybe there's crazy icebergs drifting past, or glaciers fracturing, or maybe whales turn up or they don't turn up. And so you get up there and the sun doesn't go down because it's the summer. So sleep is non-existent for weeks for me because the light gets so low in the evening, but the sun might not go down. Like, it'll be February, so it'll be, we're just beyond high summer. So maybe the sun will get down at 3 o'clock in the morning or something, just down by the horizon. But I've got to be out working at that time because that's when the saturation is going to be at its most. But during the day, they could be having the teams land me at penguin colonies, or we might be cruising through icebergs, or whatever the case. I have no idea what I'm going to get. But is there the potential, Elizabeth? And that's the thing for me in life, potential. Is there the potential for me getting something that adds to that Antarctic story, that long-term project? And the answer is yes. There's potential. The bucket is loaded with potential. Do I translate that? Do I maximize those opportunities to create something that I've never done before, that maybe no one's ever done before? Yeah, but I don't jinx myself. The God of Photography would nail me if I said I'm going to do it. All I can do is work hard at trying to do it. So, and obviously I'm passionate about it, but I'll leave the 10 puppies for a few weeks, of course, and I'm going to miss the puppies, but I'm going to somewhere that is literally the number one with Africa on everyone's bucket list. And so
Absolutely.
I take it quite seriously, the opportunities that I have. For me, it's a privilege what I do. Now I've made that privilege and I've had a lot of luck, and the God of Photography has shone on me, and I've had mentors in my life at different times, just a couple of times, but those times were crucial, whether that was at school or creatively. And that's important. I've tried to mentor people my whole career, even when I was younger, because I knew the benefit that it had for me. But, I know that one day for me in Antarctica, one morning for me in Antarctica is a dream for someone who will never get there because it's hard to get to. So I don't waste those opportunities. I don't sit there and go, I'm in Antarctica again. No, my brain will not go to that space because I know that people would kill. And I am the portal sometimes through which some people will experience different parts of the world. So I should value it. I should cherish those opportunities, no matter how tired I am or if I get to a point, and it's okay. There's a lot of therapy in this next sentence. It's okay for me to turn around and go, screw it. I am so knackered. I'm so tired. I just want to go home. Even if I'm looking at ice shining off a 200-foot ice wall in Antarctica, it's okay for me to turn around and go, I'm tired and I'd like to go home. Because...
But at the same time, remembering that you're the portal for
100%.
a lot of people.
100%. And so I don't. Like if that thought pops into my head, normally it wouldn't until right near the very end of a trip where you start thinking about traveling home. But it is one of those things that if that thought hits my head, I am so hardwired that the door slams closed on that in a millisecond and I get back to what I'm meant to be doing, which I love. I will shoot when I'm not on assignment just because I love creating, So if I'm sitting there and it's beautiful in Antarctica, people get, I've seen people get really depressed because it's like, it's a whiteout or it's grey or the snow's so heavy coming down. And for me, it's like, okay, maybe I'll grab a few frames. I'll make something out of it. But simultaneously, it gives me that moment to sit there and just pause and pinch myself that I'm watching a whiteout in Antarctica. Sometimes that privilege of just sitting there seeing something, and I messed up. I messed up in, when was it? In October or November, just gone. And I'm watching a leopard in Africa. So again, and a leopard are hard to see. They're hard to find. So people go on safari to Africa and they go, we got leopard on the first day. That is not normal. 9 times out of 10, you won't get leopard. I'm sitting there working with an archaeologist from National Geographic, one of my best mates. We were on a shoot together. He wasn't doing archaeology there, but he was in the other places that we were working. And I'm sitting there and I'm chatting. It's the sun's hot and everything, and I'm not paying attention. The leopard yawns, and my mate, the archaeologist, is on the camera. But I'm sitting there, I'm chatting there. Of all things, I'm chatting about girls to one of the other team, and I'm sitting there because, I've done a lot of TV or whatever. Sometimes vehicles pull up and they go, oh, you're Jason from TV, whatever. Yeah, and, and everything. So we're having that conversation. But my guide in the front, who I know very well, he just looks around at me, even though he's working for me, he looks around at me with disgust and says, you're not on your game. And I just turned around and I went, I know. And that's fine. I've seen leopard yawn before, whatever. But I missed that damn shot, Elizabeth. And that frame, because as I turned around and I saw the jaw at its apex, the jaw's open at its apex, enormous whiskers and everything, my brain saw that frame and will see it till the day I die. And because that's how I punish myself. I shouldn't take 2 seconds off the camera, really, when I'm watching a leopard. What sort of idiot am I? That's not my first rodeo. It's a hot day. The leopard's going to yawn at some point. I should have had my eye glued to that lens without taking it off. Yeah, we were there for 4 hours and I took my eye away for 30 seconds, but that 30 seconds cost me the 4 hours, So what are you going to do?
It happens.
Yeah, it happens.
Jason, you're amazing. You're completely amazing.
Thank you.
Everyone needs to buy this book. Yeah. It is seriously one of the most stunning. Every page makes you think, makes you feel lucky to be alive, makes you feel lucky to be a part of this earth.
Thank you.
And it's all coming from this portal, bringing it to you.
That's right. If you want to know the insanity behind my eyeballs in my brain, buy the book. Yeah. And it's got a lot of that in it too.
Well, thank you, Jason, so much.
Thanks.
This was awesome.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Thanks for the time.
To learn more about Jason, his work, and his new book, go to our website, speciesunite.com. We will have links to everything. We're on Facebook and Instagram at Species Unite. If you have a spare moment and could do us a favor, please subscribe, rate, review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts. It really helps people find the show. I would like to thank everyone at Species Unite, including Gary Knudsen, Caitlin Pierce, Amy Jones, Paul Healy, Santina Polkey-Link, Bethany Jones, Lorraine Doherty, Hannah Gabrielson, and Anna Kollner, who wrote and performed today's music. Thank you for listening. Have a wonderful day.